I'm Barry Herniman, and I'm going to take you now through three very colourful demonstrations showing you exactly what we can do with this wonderful medium. So the first one we're going to do is a simple, it's a little, well, I'm going to say lane, it's not a lane, it's a little footpath actually, in Exmoor with a few trees and that. And we're going to flick some lovely colour up into the foliage. We're going to paint in the trunks there, and then we can get going. You'll see that I've actually drawn this in pen. The only reason I've done that is because it shows up better as a demo. You know, when I'm painting, you can see what I'm doing. Sometimes a pencil won't show up that well. So if you really don't like doing pen, then by all means use pencils. That's not a problem. That's the line drawing, and this is there's the picture that we're going to do. Looks complicated, but don't worry. I'm going to simplify that down. We're just going to get all these lovely light bits. Then we get the dark bits, and we get a few shadows coming up there, but keep it simple. But what I want to do, and I'll keep banging on about this, is keep it nice and juicy and keep the colours moving about on the paper. Don't overmix them on the palette. So before we start, let's go in and I'll show you. Now what I've done is I've now squeezed out my paints: bright yellow, Indian yellow, madder brown, cobalt turquoise, cobalt blue, and a little bit of phthalo green, which is rather nice. So there, just to keep the colours nice and simple. And if you see, I've sprayed them just to keep them nice and juicy. And you'll see that where the spray is actually sitting on top of this this paper. This paper is actually a rip-off. Or should I say a tear-off? Not a rip-off. That sounds wrong. It's a tear-off palette. For oils and acrylics, which is great. And what it is a paper covered with a sort of like a varnish, so that the colours just sit on the paper rather than soaking in. And it makes a really good, cheap, but very effective palette. So there we go. So we're going to start off, and we're going to get in and we're going to do some painting. So without any more ado, I'm going to use my number 2 Pro Art long handled brush. Whoops, and I'm going to start mixing up to kind of, if I pull this over here and just show you how, I won't do this every time, but just to start off, just to show you what I'm doing, I'm taking some colour and I'm mixing it as a nice sort of watercolour consistency. Okay, now these are acrylics, and usually acrylics, when I first started painting acrylics, you don't really reduce them down to water, because A, you lose the colour intensity, and B, it doesn't stick to the paper. Well, I'm afraid with the advent of these new acrylics, that just does not hold. I was going to say hold water. Oh my goodness, it's a good job I can paint, because I can't tell jokes. So there you go. Right, so there's a nice drop of bright yellow, and then we're going to come in with a little drop of Indian yellow. Whoops, and the thing is, I'm getting you can see how watery it is. It's sort of flowing down the page, and you'll notice I'm not mixing the colours together. I'm keeping them side by side so I can dip and keep the colours moving about. I don't want to over mix them. Now I'm going to add a little bit of cobalt turquoise in there, and then last but not least, a little bit of cobalt blue in there. There we are. So we've now got these colours ready. I'm going to have to set this up fairly straight, otherwise the colour's going to go everywhere. So we'll set that over there. Back to the painting. Right, now I'm going to start off literally with my brush now, and I'm going to dip into some of the Indian. Whoops, that's not quite what I wanted. Dip into the light. Yeah, it won't matter, because I could say I did that on purpose, couldn't I? And my nose would probably grow by degrees. So we just put some colour down into here, put some colour into there. So I'm just dabbling the colour in, and you can see I'm sort of dipping the colour, moving it about. It's lovely. This brush, this long-handled brush, really, you can dip colour in and move it about really nicely. You can do this with a watercolour brush. There's no right or wrong way with acrylics. With acrylics, they're so versatile, they really are. So you can do a bit here, do a bit there. Just don't overmix. I'm not going to keep banging on about this overmixing, because when I'm doing watercolours, because I'm predominantly a watercolourist, that's how I started all this lot, people would always overmix, and it was such a pity because watercolours are such a beautiful medium. But exactly the same with acrylics. If you can easily overmix acrylics, and then before you know where you are, you've got colours that have gone really dead on you, and it's such a shame. So I'm going in with this lovely bright yellow in here. Don't worry about getting to the edges. I'm doing this in a dabbing motion, as you can see, because I don't want this. This is obviously foliage, so obviously foliage hasn't got that hard an edge. So there we put it. Now I'm going to go in a minute. I'm going to flick some colour or scummel a colour, whatever. I say flick the colour because I've been called hair flick many times, so so I go with it. So hair flick I shall be. So we've now started. We've got a nice basic colour there, and we've been using our number two long flat, and I'm now going to go in with a little bit of Indian yellow, with a little bit of cobalt turquoise, and a touch of cobalt blue, and start dropping it into there. There we go. So what I'm doing is I'm just literally flicking some colour into here, and I want to get that fairly dark down through there. So let's just flick a bit more colour down into there. I mean, if you're not into flicking, don't worry, you can easily just tickle the colour in there. There we go. And I'm using this this is a watercolour brush, a number 6 round watercolour brush. A nice little brush it holds a lot of water, and you can. It's a nice one for doing little. For doing leaves and goodness knows what. So we just put that into there like that. There we go. Now we don't want all this to be a hard edge, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to flick some colour over the trunks as well. I flick a bit of colour down over here, because I don't want, like I say, I don't want it all to be too regimented. So there we go. Let's get a bit of colour into there as well. There we are. So we'll get a little bit more colour in there, and a little bit more down through there. We are talking trees here, so it doesn't really matter if it's not exact. There we go. Very nice. And I'll just add a little more dark down into here. So I'm adding just the tiniest little bit of cobalt blue into there. There we go. Can you see how it's building up nicely? And we're getting a really nice canopy of leaves in there. Okay, so down in here, this is sort of foreground, and we want to go back into the background a bit. So we don't want that jumping out at us too much. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of the Indian yellow, and a little bit of the cobalt turquoise. Again, a semi-mix, not a complete mix. And we'll go in and we'll just put some of that colour down into there. There we go. And put a little bit of colour into there. There we are. And then as it comes down into here, it starts getting a bit darker. So I'm going to add a little bit of the darker blue, which is the cobalt blue. Put that little, and I'm going to add the tiniest touch of madder brown in there. There we are, just in there. So just those little dark bits. If you're following the reference photo, you'll see it goes quite dark down into there. So let's just put that, and then that'll show up that lovely little light bit in there. There we go. And then if you want to, I just use the back end of the brush and I just pull out the odd. There we go. I'm just literally using the back end of the brush just to pull out a few branches. There we go. Nothing that's jumping out at you, just a nice feel that there's something sitting there. We've got this lovely light bit sitting here, which is very nice. We've got some more. Let's get a bit more foliage in here, shall we? Why not? Get a little more There we are, a little bit of greenery in there. There we go. A little bit up there as well. And then while you've got that greenery, again, just using the back end of the brush, just bring out a few little, just pull a few little twigs here and there, just make it look a bit more tree-like. Don't worry about going all to the edges. This is a vignette, okay? So a vignette, we don't go to all four corners. We're just literally keeping it within the middle. And again, this is just a simple exercise so to get you into how these lovely acrylics work, okay? So we're going to drop down now. We'll leave that there because that's actually quite light. That's actually very light there along the top end of that bit there. So let's just go in here, get another little bit of light stuff. So again, in with the old bright yellow, a little bit of cobalt turquoise, and we'll start putting that down through there. So you want to keep, we don't want a hard edge there, we want a fairly soft edge along that edge there. So let's just pull down here, and we need to keep a sharp edge along that bottom line there because that is where the path goes there. Okay, so just pull that down through there and just bring the color down into here. And again, it's a dabbing motion because I don't want this to look too static, okay? And we can do the same with this side here. And again, we can go in and we can plonk some color down. We can flick some color into that. There's a lot of color going into here. There we go, a little bit more into there. There we go. Let's lift that up a bit so you can see what's going on. And I'm just going to add a little bit of cobalt blue, only a touch, just here and there, and then up into this area here, and up there as well. There we go. Can you see how we're starting to build? This whole thing's starting to build really nicely now. Now we've got the sunshine area coming down through here. So we want to keep this fairly light. So I'm going in with don't want it to be too bright because it's actually not so much in the sunshine as these bits here. So let's go in predominantly with the Indian yellow. And then give that, there we go. So you can see it's still fairly bright, but not as bright as the sunlight bits. So let's bring that down through there. Here we go. There we go, lovely. So we're building all this lovely texture up here. Again, don't worry about getting it right to the edges. That's not what this is all about. Now you can notice little bits of colour on the edge of so just plonk a bit of colour, there we are. And I'm still painting this very much in a watercolour manner. Okay, you can see how the paints are made. Now back in with that little number 6 watercolour brush, and then just flick a few bits and pieces down in there. There we are, just a few. There we go. Now you'll notice it'll all mix and merge and mingle in together, which will be lovely. Then we push that down through there. There we go. And again, I want to keep this simple. You'll notice from when you look at the photo, always refer to the photo as well. I know I keep banging on about this, but it does help to keep the photo. I mean, you can make up the photo, make up the paints to a certain degree, but try and keep where the lights go and where the darks go, and then the whole thing should come together quite nicely. So put a bit of colour down into there. There we go, and I'll get a little bit of cobalt turquoise in there, and again a little bit of flick into there. There we are. So that's working nicely, and we're going to let that dry. And once that's dry, we've pretty much got all our lovely foliage. The only thing is we don't want that as white, so I'm going to go in pretty much with just a little bit of pure cobalt turquoise. Okay, really, literally just pure cobalt turquoise, and I'm just going to flick. There we are. Just flick a few little bits in there, and flick a few little bits in there as well, just to keep that And if you want, you can always just add a few little branches coming out with the back end of your brush. There we go. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Okay, so before we go on any further, I don't really want to mess about with all this while this is all wet. So we'll stop here. I'll quickly use the hairdryer, get a hairdryer, dry all this little lot off, and we can come back in and start the next bit. Okay, let's start on the next little bit, which is the tree trunks. Okay, that's a bit different. So we're going to go up from a watercolour consistency, and we're going to mix up some nice creamier consistency. Okay, so let's take a bit of madder brown here. Okay, and we don't want to over mix this now. So there we are. There's a nice drop of madder brown. That's definitely a more. Can you see that? You know, that's not wobbling around on the palette as much as the other stuff did. And then we're going to add a little bit of cobalt blue of that, and they definitely got a greeny tinge. So I'm going to add a little bit of the dark green in there as well. So there we go. So we've got a really nice colour in there. So let's bring that over there. Let's bring this over here, and let's go in and get some of the trunks in there. So push those down through there. Keep your edges nice and sharp, and then start dropping the colour down into there. We go. And the same in here. Now you notice when I drew the outline there, I made sure that it was quite wobbly, because obviously that's where the canopy is. Now I'm doing this deliberately. I'm going to add a tiny little bit of yellow into that, because I want to, if you notice, it's a little lighter down this edge. So go in with a little lighter area down that edge. There we go. And let's do the same with this here. It's actually got a lighter edge down this corner, down this edge here. So we're going in, and I've added to this lovely dark, I've added just the tiniest bit of Indian yellow. So there we go. Put that down in there. Nothing too light, but just a nice little. There we go. So put that down into there. That's gone quite dark, and it's actually quite light down there as well. So let's put that in there. So we're getting these little light bits along the edge, and a little bit down too. That's gone a bit greeny. So and I've added, again, every now and then I see a bit of colour, and I add another little bit of colour to it. So you can move these colours back. Now you notice there, I've put in a little bit of cobalt turquoise, just because it's obviously got a bit greeny in there. So let's bring that down through there. And again in here, let's bring that down into there. Keeping this is a fairly dry application of paint here. So keep that coming down through there. And then as that drops down there, that definitely does get a bit darker. So let's bring that down into there. Here we go. And then take that down into the actual side of the verge there. There we are. So that's rather a nice tree trunk. Now that tree trunk there, if you notice, it isn't totally dark. Okay, same with this one. It's definitely got a greeny tinge to it, I can see. So almost talk to yourself and say, well, what colours do I see here? And if you see if you think to yourself, I see a bit more yellow in that, add a bit more yellow. You know, all the time, when you've got to try and this is the way you're painting, not necessarily the way I'm painting. You want to try and get yourself into your own way of painting. So you're using me as a bit of a yardstick at the moment, but on the way to finding out how you want to paint and how you want to apply your paint as well. So, you know, by all means, if you want to add a little bit of yourself into this, please do, you know, because that's what it's all about. It's all about finding your own expression into this wonderful world of acrylics here. And I'm sure once you get into it, you'll just absolutely love it. Again, so you can see, if I hold this up a little bit further, look, you can see how those colours, look how those colours mix and merge there. Don't you think that's lovely? So we're just letting little bits, and I'm trying to emulate the fact that this is a bark. So it's not something that's actually just flat. It's got texture in there and everything else. So we want to try and make sure that it's got all these lovely textures. Now I'm going into this one. Now this is quite dark. This tree here is quite dark. So let's go in. I've added a little bit more blue to this bit here. I'll add a little bit of madder brown to it as well. I might just touch more water. It's just drying out a bit. Keep your colours, all the time. Keep your colours nice and moist, nice and wet. Don't let them all dry out. And what I do is I've got a spray atomiser, and I'll just keep the paints nice and juicy. Okay, so I just keep spraying them here and there, and again with these modern paints, as long as you keep spraying them, they'll stay wet for ages, which is so much better than the old ones, because that was one of the real bugbears for me, is the fact that they just dried so quickly. And which is okay if you want something to dry quickly, but if you wanted to work into it, and it literally, you couldn't do that, because literally it would dry on you. So there we go. So we've got that. So that's rather nice as well. And this one's got quite a nice dark bit to it. So let's put that bit in there as well. Let's get that into there. Let's put a little bit into here, and little bits into there, so we don't see everything on there. And that's quite dark. So again, you know, we've got a little bit of blue into there. So let's bring that down into there. There we go. And we've got this little light bit here, which is nice. So we want to play off a little bit of counter change here. Light against dark. I do love lights against dark. So let's go down and let's really give a nice bit of dark against that. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? So we just bring that through there like that. Then that will show that up. Can you see? So we've got a little bit of light against dark. Lovely bit of counter change there. There we are. And just tuck a bit into there. So we really have. We're nearly there, folks. We're nearly there. So while that's all drying off nicely, let's come in here and start laying down a little bit of colour into the path. So for that, I'm going to use my number, I can't remember, number 4, my number 4 flat. Okay, and this one is got a slightly shorter. It's a short flat. Okay, and I want to do that because I want to bring the colour coming through there like that. So we're going to go in with a little Indian yellow, a little bit of madder brown, and we'll pull the colour across. Here we go. Pull that down through there like that. There we go. Pull that down through there. Don't worry about it going exact, because and also the oh, I'm doing it the wrong way. The path actually is going this way. So let's go down like that. Here we go. And this isn't a dry brush, but I'm pulling the colour. I'm pulling the colour down. Here we go. Pull the colour down through there. Here we go. We'll keep that nice and light up through there. And again, back with the little number 6 watercolour brush. Let's get a bit of texture in here, okay? I mean, you just know I'm going to put texture into it anyway. So a little bit of flick here and there. While it's wet, it'll all sort of, there we go. Look at that, isn't that lovely? There we are. So we put that through this. We've got a nice bit of texture in there. And we've got a bit of texture down into the verge bit itself as well. And if you want to put a little bit of, just a few little bits of grasses here and there. And the same here. And what we're going to do is, while that's still wet, let's go in and drop in a few little bits into here. There we go. So just keep it simple. I'm just using my little brush here just to keep that up through there. We go. So I'm scraping off some colour off the palette there, just to bring. And the same is, we've got some lovely darks coming in through here. So let's get a bit of colour coming down through there as well. So there's some dark up through there, and some dark into there. Here we are, there. So it gets it along the edge nicely. And then while that's going off, we can come in and we can put in a couple of nice little tree trunks in there. Maybe just a little bit darker, I feel. There we go. That's nice. There we are. Yep, like that. Yeah, so we go through that little area there, and we've got those tree trunks sort of sitting there nicely. And we let that go off. We'll come back and we'll put a little bit of shadow across there. But I want to go back in here, and I want to just add a little bit more strength to some of this dark in here. So I'm going in. Let's go back to the. There we are. So you can see I've not over mixed. Okay, there's still little bits here. So I'm bringing this colour down through here. I'm bringing that colour into there. And I'm going to bring some of that into there as well. And I'm going to bring some of that into there as well. So we're going to get some really nice. But notice I'm not over mixing it. I'm keeping the colour moving about, but it's not over mixing. Okay, so we take that away from there, come back again, and we just wham some colour into here. Notice all these technical terms. Here we go. There we are. And we get a nice little edge to this canopy of tree here. There we are. Put that into there. There we go. And it'll knock all this back as well, which will be rather nice. I wish I'd stop saying rather nice, but never mind. There we go. And a little bit more up into there. And you can see it's sort of starting. And then if you want to, you can just tickle in a few. So it's not all too spotty. You can just tickle a few of those there. So there we are. So we're moving the colour around. So we're getting some really nice little splatters in here and there. But we don't want the whole lot, just a whole lot of splattering. So it's quite nice to sort of come in and soften some of that out. There we go. Okay. And a little bit down through here as well. We've got some dark. Let's get a few dark bits down in there. Let's put a few in here as well, so it doesn't look as if there's no tree going up into there. There we are. And we can bring a little bit more dark just up into that top area there, which I think would be expedient. So let's bring that was a big word, wasn't it? My goodness. I must have swallowed a dictionary last night. Right. And again, if you want to get a bit of texture, a really nice texture, put in a few flicks like this and use this wonderful blending tool. There it is. Look at that. And just tickle some of that in there. So again, what we're trying to do, we're trying to mix these colours around without making them too mechanical. Don't like anything looking too mechanical. So we bring a bit of colour down into there. And we're nearly there. So the last but not least, I'm going to go in, I'm going to just dry this off quickly, and I'm going to put a bit of a shadow across there and up there, and we're done. So for this area now, I'm going to go in with my short flat, and I'm going to go down and across and then up. So let's mix up. Where we go down into the grass, it'll be a greeny shadow. So let's go in Indian yellow as usual, a little bit of cobalt turquoise, a little bit of cobalt blue, and just a touch of madder brown. Not too much. Don't go over the top. Again, semi sort of, and we're just going to bring the colour down over there. Here we go. Bring it down, down into there. Here we go. Okay, so that's got a nice fit. And then we're going to come up through here and add into there. There we are. And then just bring some nice darks not too, I mean, it's not a hugely bright day, so we don't have to go too mad. But anyway, so that's quite nice. And then obviously for the path itself, we need it, it's got to be a browny sort of thing. So a little bit of madder brown, a little bit of cobalt blue, and then just come across. Not too dark as he goes in too dark. There we go. There we go. And a bit of shadow down through there as well. And let's just come across there. Here we are. And if you want, you've got a little bit of this mixed up, so let's just add a little bit of dark here and there. You can overdo this very easily. It says he overdoing it, but never mind. And that, as they say, is that. So there we go. So we got ourselves a really rather nice little, very quick picture. Oh, if you want to, while that's still going off, we could just add a little, just a touch more texture in the. There we go. That's better. Yeah, that's nicer. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, much nicer. Right. Okay, so there we are, folks. So hopefully this will be your first foray into painting a landscape in acrylics. So if I bring it up closer, so you can start seeing some of the mixtures we've got here to keep them. So there we go. So there's all our greenery. So we've started off with all this lovely Indian yellow in here. There's the lighter bright yellow in there, and then we've added little bits of cobalt turquoise. And then when we go down into this area, you can see where I've added the cobalt blue. So we get a darker, I would say an edge, but a darker feel there. And then that goes across this bit in the background here. Look at all these lovely colours we've got in the trunks themselves. We're keeping the little light bits in here. I mean, you could put a bit more colour in there if you want, but I think that's right enough. For this stage, I think to keep it simple, okay? Because otherwise you can get overcomplicated, and instead of enjoying it, you suddenly think, oh, it's not quite working. But can you see? Look at all the colours we're getting here. You know, little bits. Don't overmix your colours. Look at the colours there. See, I mean, probably by the time you've got to stage 3, you'll probably think, doesn't he go on? But I can't help the fact that I really do think that keeping your colours bold and clean, it does make an awful lot of difference to how you paint and how your paintings evolve as well. So anyway, so that's the first one. The next one we're going to be doing will be I'll get it out in a minute. It's a snow scene along the back road near our place, so that'll be something totally different. So we'll get on with that in the next demo.